Alright, y'all, let's break this thing all the way down. I didn't have y'all waiting this long for nothing.
This is exactly what I've been waiting for.
Welcome to Street School. It's your boy Rico bringing y'all an off-season edition of Redskins Report. Today's topics: what are the great 4-3 defenses in history? What is a 4-3 defense? What are the different types of the 4-3 defense? What are their advantages and disadvantages? What are the differences between Ron Rivera's and Jack Del Rio's defenses? And what will the 2020 Redskins defense more than likely look like? How do current Redskins players fit into this new defense? And lastly, which possible draft prospects and free agents can we get to fill the holes that we have and to add to our depth? Man, I'm finally done, man. Let's get it. Part 1. What are the great 4-3 defenses in history? This information isn't very important, so that's why I'm going to keep this part brief. But I do want to include this because it gets you hype about the potential of switching to the 4-3 defense. Most recently, the great 49ers defense of 2019 runs a 4-3, more so a wide 9. I'm going to get into that a little later. And that wide 9 scheme is actually really effective. But like I said, I'm going to get to that a little later. Also, our 2008 Redskins defense ran it when we had one of the best defenses of all time. The 2007 Colts, the 2008 Eagles, the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, and the 2002 Buccaneers all ran 4-3 defenses, and all of which are great time defenses. Jack Del Rio's great 2012 and 2014 Broncos defenses also ran the 4-3. Now let's talk about what the 4-3 defense even is. Part 2. What is a 4-3 defense? First of all, before we get into anything, here's an illustration of all of the defensive line technique destinations. The furthest outside that you can get on each side of the offensive line is the outside shoulders of the tight ends, which is the 9 tech. And then you go all the way down to the 0 tech, which means you're head up on with the center. And there's all of those other techs in between. And then in between the center and the guard is the A gap. Between the guard and the tackle is the B gap. Between the tackle and the tight end, the C gap. And then on the outside shoulder of the tight end is the D gap. We will refer to these techniques a lot when breaking down all of the 4-3 defense types and alignments. So memorize this or keep it handy. Now, first of all, throughout this video, for those of you who don't know, I will be referring to the strong side and the weak side of the offense. The strong side of the offense is where the tight end is. Most of the time, it's to the right of the offense, which is the left of the defense. And to break it all the way down, a 4-3 defense, often called the 43 defense, instead of saying 4-3, they just say 43. In its base, very basic form, has 4 defensive linemen, which is the 4, and then 3 linebackers, which is the 3, and then 4 defensive backs to make it 11 players. There are 2 defensive ends and 2 defensive tackles. A Sam linebacker on the strong side, a Mike linebacker in the middle, and a weak side linebacker on the weak side. And there's 2 outside corners, 1 free safety, and 1 strong safety. The defensive ends hold down the edge against the run, and they rush the quarterback against the pass. Depending on which type of 4-3 defense you are in, the defensive tackles either have 1 gap responsibilities and have the primary objective of penetrating, or they have 2 gap responsibilities and have to be smart and strong enough to hold down and be responsible for 2 gaps. Either way, they are in the middle of the defensive line, usually to eat up space. In the basic 4-3 front, they are usually 2 gapping, with them being lined up directly in front of the guards, making both of them defensive tackles and not one of them a defensive tackle and the other one a nose tackle, like the other versions of the 4-3 that we're going to talk about soon. Then, the Sam linebacker is usually the best tackler and best pass rusher out of the linebacker group. They are on the side with the tight end, the strong side, and will usually cover the tight end on pass plays. And then the Mike linebacker is usually the smartest player on defense and possibly the biggest, because he's going to be the one that's primarily responsible for stopping the run. They call the defensive plays, and they have to be able to fight through traffic, tackle well, and be the most proactive rather than reactive player out of the linebacker group, and must be able to blitz effectively. And they will have to be able to cover well if the defense loves to run Tampa too, which I'm going to talk about a little later also. The will linebacker must be the best cover linebacker, usually the fastest. Will be on the slot receiver side and will be asked to cover the slot receiver most of the time, which are the really speedy guys like Odell Beckham and in our case Steven Sims. And then you have the corners. They can either be asked to primarily run zone or man coverage. Zone coverage, for those of y'all who don't know, is when you protect a particular area. Man coverage is when you literally go and guard a specific person and follow him no matter where he goes. It depends on the defensive coordinator. Jack Del Rio has preferred man corners in the past, so I'm assuming he will like that here too, but we're going to get deeper into that later. The free safety will primarily be asked to just stay deep and not let anything get past him. He will not be used in the box as much as Monte Nicholson had to the past few years. Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio prefer their free safeties to do free safety things, which is cover. And then lastly, there's the strong safety, who will cover less than we asked Landon Collins to do last year and will primarily be in the box. The strong safety in the 4-3 defense, especially in Jack Del Rio's, is almost like another linebacker, a hybrid linebacker safety. And as you can see, this is the one gap responsibility, where each defensive lineman is responsible for a gap, rather than the two interior defensive linemen lining up directly over an offensive lineman and having to be responsible for two gaps each. Now for the weaknesses and strengths. Let's start with the strengths. Very basic, so players can play more than they think, be more proactive rather than reactive, and make plays and decisions with confidence and familiarity. Players can just go without getting flat-footed and thinking too much. They have a greater sense of their responsibilities. Players get to do what they do best and aren't asked to play out of their comfort zones. The free safety gets to stay deep and is not forced to play in the box where their tackling and angles get exposed. The strong safety is primarily in the box and not asked to cover a lot, which is where the strong safety usually gets exposed. The defensive ends are actually defensive ends and don't have to cover, which is great for a special someone from Ohio State. They simply just go get the guy with the ball. That's it. Don't worry about backpedaling for any reason. Run straight forward when the ball is hiked. And then the linebackers now have one extra linebacker to help split up the space that normally two players have to cover. Now it's split up into 3 parts when they zone cover instead of 2. Now, one of the reasons this defense is so dependent on 4 productive pass rushing defensive linemen is that the 4-3 defense allows for 7 players to be in coverage and still get pressure. It's pretty much up to that front 4 to get pressure, minimum blitzing. And according to some research by Pro Football Focus, the best performing defenses last season focused more on amassing great cover talent over pass rushing talent. So the more people we have in coverage doing their job well, the better the defense performs, according to the deep research and advanced statistics that Pro Football Focus put in just a couple of months ago. But to take it back to the basics of the advantages, the 4-3 is ideal for generating pass rush with the least amount of players attacking the quarterback, allowing the other 7 players to focus on coverage. So the 4-3 is better than the 3-4 at stopping and disrupting deadly pass rushing attacks. And in a passing league, where the teams with the best quarterbacks and passing attacks tend to be the teams who win the most games, running a defense that is best suited to suppress this or even shut it down should lead to much more wins, especially if we find the right personnel to maximize the potential of the 4-3 defense. Also, many 4-3 defenses rely on and set up the middle linebacker, the Mike, to make the bulk of the tackles in the run game. But if the front 4 is great enough, the Mike linebacker can contribute some of this department, and most importantly for the advantages of the 4-3, the Mike can also go help in coverage, like the Tampa 2, of which I'm going to talk about in greater detail a little bit later, with a diagram and everything so you can see what I'm talking about. Also, another advantage is that the 4-3 defense is built to allow the defensive coordinator to have flexibility to run both man and a lot of different zone coverages. Every defense is able to run man. It's simple, just man up. But the 4-3 defense allows defensive coordinators to deploy an even more complicated package of zone coverages. There are usually 4 defensive backs and 3 linebackers at the very least at any given moment. All 7 of them can be in zone coverage, handling their respective zones. And this allows defensive coordinators to be able to get really creative with where their zones are. So even though most of the 4-3 defense is very simplistic and easy to predict, especially the defensive line part, zone coverages have the potential to get really weird and unpredictable for opposing offenses when the 4-3 defense is dedicated to stopping the pass and don't have to worry about dedicating as many players as possible to run support and rushing the passer. And then lastly, since the 4-3 defense is far more simple, for those of y'all who coach youth football teams like my boy Tommy Knockers on Twitter, it is the best defense to initially teach kids. It's the best defense to start off their learning of the game and their responsibilities and roles and all of that type of stuff. Most of it's just pretty straightforward enough to teach little youngins off the rip. Now, those are some of the main advantages to the 4-3 defense. But as we talk about the specific kinds, there will be different kinds of advantages and disadvantages that we'll talk into further detail later. But for now, what are the main weaknesses of the 4-3 defense? The 4-3 defense is heavily dependent on great to elite pass rush and defensive ends. The 4-3 defense, no matter which type you're in, whether it be the wide 9, over, or under, is heavily reliant on generating an effective and deadly pass rush out of just those 4 defensive linemen, with very little blitzing. If you don't have an elite all-pro level or at the very least Pro Bowl level defensive ends, then the 4-3 almost becomes useless because then the whole castle crashes. The whole fort is destroyed, abandoned ship. So basically with Ryan Kerrigan going to be 32 by the time the regular season starts and Montez Sweat not elite yet, it looks like we will draft Chase Young if we even hope to start off on the right foot with the switch to this 4-3 defense. I mean, your front 4 has to be crazy to make this defense work. Also, the 4-3 in general is just more reliant on player talent than the 3-4 is. The 3-4 defense throws exotic and complicated blitzes to generate pressure. The 4-3 defense depends on a dominant front 4 to get that job done. Same against the run. Since the 4-3 defense is far more conservative, with it not being complicated, lacking exotic and often blitzes, and relying heavily on its talent, the 4-3 defense is heavily reliant on the front 7's talent to stop the run. This is one of the ways the 4-3 defense has higher potential than the 3-4 defense. It sets up its front 7 to maximize their impact by putting a lot on their plates, which is a common theme I'm going to keep regurgitating throughout this video. So if that front 7 is great, then the 4-3 defense can stop the run very well and even better than the 3-4 could potentially. But if the front 7 is bad to average and even on just some level of kinda good, then that 4-3 defense will get ran on all day. I could run against a 4-3 defense that isn't very talented up front. There's so many holes in the 4-3 defense if your front 7 is not going crazy. Also, another thing the 4-3 defense is relying on is a very smart and instinctive Mike linebacker. No matter how great the front 4 may be, the Mike linebacker will have a large portion of the responsibility for making tackles in the run game and in coverage. The Mike linebacker also needs the size, speed, and power to get things done. He needs the high IQ to be the on-field coach for the defense and to sniff out the play and know where the ball is headed before the play even happens. But he also needs the speed to plug up that hole before the running back even gets there, and he needs the size and power to shed potential blocks and make the tackle against guards, possibly the center and offensive tackles, all of which are definitely larger than him in size. And if the Mike linebacker doesn't have all of that, then offenses will be able to run the ball all over the 4-3 defense, even if the front 4 is great with elite players all over it. Also, even though the central theme of the 4-3's weaknesses is that it's reliant on high talent in a lot of places, rather than complicated defensive schemes and play calling to get the job done, everybody knows their role and rarely do anything outside of their job description. But everybody must be really good at their select few responsibilities or the entire system may collapse. But if you have the right talent, the 4-3 defense has the most potential for greatness, but also has the highest potential for failure. But even beyond the reliance on high-level talent across the board, the 4-3 defense's simplicity is easier to read for the best quarterbacks in the league. The best QBs can spot weaknesses in the 4-3 defense easier since its player assignments are much less complicated and random. They are more predictable, and great offenses and quarterbacks can exploit those predictable patterns and guess what the defense is going to do, even a lot of the times pre-snap. But again, if you have the talent, the 4-3 defense being predictable won't really matter. Now, part 3. And this is the part that took the most time when making this video, but was also kind of the most fun part. What are the different types of 4-3 defenses? One of the biggest advantages to the 4-3 defense that I briefly mentioned earlier is that you can run so many different types of 4-3 defenses. There are 4 main types of the 4-3 defense. The basic, which I just showed y'all a little bit earlier, the 4-3 over, the 4-3 under, and the wide 9. I'm about to explain what all of them look like and what the advantages and disadvantages are for each type. I already told y'all how the basic 4-3 defense works and where each player is lined up in each of their responsibilities, but now it's time to get to the more complicated ones. Now, what is most interesting is that the different types of the 4-3 defense allow for more complicated defensive plays. The base 4-3 utilizes minimal blitzing, but the different fronts of the 4-3 defense allows defensive coordinators to get more creative and use multiple blitz packages and schemes. And all forms of the 4-3 allow defensive coordinators to get creative with coverage packages, even in just the 4-3 base, the most basic form of the 4-3. Defensive coordinators get to have a lot of fun confusing offenses with all kinds of coverage packages and schemes in any form of the 4-3 defense, even the base like I just said. But these other forms of the 4-3 defenses that I'm about to talk about allow for defensive coordinators to get even more creative, allowing them to blitz and all kinds of stuff, which is usually a 3-4 defense type of trait. Now let's talk about the 4-3 over first. The 4-3 over has the strong side defensive tackle taking a 3 technique position on the outside shoulder of the strong side offensive guard, the right guard. The backside defensive tackle moves towards the strong side and takes the 1 technique. So basically the right defensive tackle is now considered a nose tackle and is lined up in a 1 technique on the weak side of the offense, between the center and the left guard, attacking the weak side shoulder of the center. The left defensive tackle is now in a 3 technique between the right guard and the right tackle, attacking the strong side of the right guard. And then the left defensive end is now on the strong shoulder of the tight end and is completely on the edge, all of the way outside in a 9 tech. And the right defensive end is still in a 5 tech, attacking the weak side shoulder of the left tackle. Then you have the tan-0-tan linebacker alignment that refers to the tans as the linebackers being over the offensive tackles lined up right in front of them, and the 0 linebacker is lined up directly over the center. So now the Sam linebacker is considered a tan linebacker on the strong side and is lined up directly over the right tackle. The Mike linebacker is now the 0 linebacker and is lined up directly in front of the center. And the Will linebacker is also now a tan linebacker, but on the weak side and is lined up directly over the left tackle. These 3 linebackers are now responsible for the 3 holes left in the front 7 after the defensive line shifts over to the strong side in the 4-3 over defense. The strong side tan linebacker to the right, who is the Sam linebacker, is now responsible for the side C gap, which is in between the right tackle and the tight end. The 0 linebacker is responsible for the A gap that is on the strong side of the center, since the nose tackle has the other A gap responsibility. And finally, the weak side tan linebacker, aka the Will linebacker, over there to the left is responsible for the weak side B gap, in between the left guard and the left tackle. And these are just the very basics because things can always change. Like there could be stunts, or the tight end can move to the outside of the left tackle and turn that side, the left side of the offense, into the strong side, which would cause the defense to shift around and adjust to that. And then there's many more things that can change how this looks and all of the responsibilities, but explaining all of that would turn into a 4-hour seminar, and that is crazy. Not on that one today. This video is already going to be long enough. But in summary, the 4-3 over defense is better against the run because the defensive tackles are shaded towards the tight end, towards the strength of the defense, which makes it harder to run. Blocking to turn them aside and move them out of the way is very difficult, and it also keeps the linebackers cleaner and allows them to attack the runners with less traffic and clog. The defensive line clogs up spaces and clears things out, while the linebackers step up and make easier tackles and run defense. The 4-3 over is less aggressive than the 4-3 under, but can be deadly with a dominant, very strong front 4, along with very fast, smart, and sure tackling linebackers. But let's go ahead and move on to the 4-3 under. The 4-3 under is the defense that the great Legion of Boom up in Seattle used when their defense was one of the best in the league. But it's one of the defenses that's heavily reliant on talent to be successful. Like even more than the usual basic 4-3 defense relies on great talent. But really it's just in a different way. Because instead of depending on elite pass rushers, it's relying a little bit more on an elite secondary and a versatile set of safeties. That's why the Legion of Boom was so great. They sometimes ran a cover 3 that could only be effective with their talent. Like no other team in the league probably could have ran that exact defense. Like for example, they sometimes ran this type of cover 3. Earl Thomas, the elite range free safety, also had the coverage skills to step up and cover the slot receiver man to man. And with each of the 2 outside corners, including Richard Sherman, taking back deep thirds, each being responsible for their respective outside 1/3 of the cover 3, they, as in the 2 corners, had to be great and dependable zone cover corners that are able to read the quarterback's eyes and react quickly to passes, breaking on routes and everything, being very aggressive and all of that. And then the craziest part is that they had the strong safety that had the coverage skills to be responsible for the middle third effectively. Cam Chancellor was not only one of, if not the hardest hitting safeties in the league, and was almost like a linebacker, but he also had the cover skills to basically do a free safety's job. The ultimate hybrid linebacker / safety. And this is how their talent allowed them to play a very specific defense that was tailored to take advantage of their greatest skill sets and talents. But this is just an example of how the Legion of Boom ran a cover 3 out of the 4-3 under. Now to break down what the 4-3 under actually is usually, let's get to that. I just wanted to give y'all an example of how a great defense run their version of the 4-3 under. Now in the 4-3 under, the nose tackle and the defensive tackle switch sides. The nose tackle is now on the strong side of the defense and the defensive tackle is now on the weak side. And just to mention it, because it is noteworthy, should have mentioned it sooner, the defensive tackle that becomes the nose tackle in these different sets of 4-3 formations is chosen because he is closer to the inside of the offensive line, closer to the center. He's deeper into the teeth of the offensive line. So he has to have more power, strength, and weight than the other interior defensive lineman has to have, who is considered the defensive tackle. But back to the 4-3 under. The nose tackle is now lined up in a 1 technique on the strong side, attacking the right shoulder of the center, and the defensive tackle is now in a 3 tech on the weak side of the offensive line, attacking the left side of the left guard. And then the left defensive end, which is to our right on the screen, is now slid into the line a little more. He is now lined up in a 5 tech, attacking the right shoulder of the offensive tackle. And then the right defensive end is lined up in a 5 tech, attacking the left shoulder of the left offensive tackle on the weak side of the offense. And now here's where things get really interesting. The Sam linebacker is now down on the line like an extra edge rusher in a sense. The Sam is on the strong side, lined up as a 9 tech, attacking the tight end strong side shoulder. But this leaves the other 2 linebackers very vulnerable. They are now essentially 3-4 linebackers. The Will linebacker is now responsible for the weak side half of the field, and the Mike linebacker is now responsible for the strong side half of the field. Usually. Sometimes the Sam linebacker will drop back in coverage. Actually quite often, depending on the defensive coordinator. But usually, the weak side linebacker has the weak side to himself, and the Mike linebacker has the strong side to himself, as far as responsibilities go. And now that these 2 linebackers are responsible for 2 halves, rather than splitting up 3 parts, they need to be athletic and smart. And the defensive backs have similar responsibilities in the 4-3 under as the 4-3 over. The different types of 4-3 formations really only changed what the front 7 is doing. So the back 4 only really changed based on what the coach wants to do on a play-by-play basis. And again, we would be here for 3 days if I were to sit here and break down all of that. And it's especially pointless because I may talk about like 30 different ways it could be done, and then Jack Del Rio may only primarily use like 2 or 3 of them. So I'm not about to dive into even deeper detail than I already am because we'll be here for 3 days. But in summary, the 4-3 under defense is more aggressive than the 4-3 over. While the 4-3 over defense shifts the front 4 towards the strength of the defense, the 4-3 under shifts the defensive line towards the weak side of the defense. Its name literally comes from under tackle, or basically the defensive tackle who lines up in a 3 tech in between the guard and the tackle on the opposite side of the formation from the tight end, the weak side. Since the defensive line has shifted towards the weak side in the 4-3 under, that is why the Sam linebacker has to come down as an extra edge rusher on the strong side to stop the run or rush the passer. This formation tends more towards specialization than the over front, creating specific roles and needs for the personnel along the front. For example, the defensive tackle who is now on the weak side and the weak side defensive end should generally be the smaller, faster, and more explosive guys. These 2 need to be set up to create athletic mismatches and get penetration into the backfield as soon as possible. But on the other side, the strong side, the nose tackle and the defensive end on that side needs to be stronger, larger, sturdier, and more powerful. That's how the 4-3 under creates more specific roles for each player in the front 7. Now also, one of the biggest weaknesses to the 4-3 under front is a running back who is good at attacking the weak side A-gap, where the only man who is responsible for covering that gap is the will linebacker, and your will linebacker is usually best at covering small receivers, not diving into the trenches to tackle the running back. But if you have a will that can excel at both, then the 4-3 under is usually dominant. But also another weakness to the 4-3 under, and this goes the same for the 4-3 over. They're both susceptible to option plays, especially the midline option. All the quarterback has to do is read which type of 4-3 front you're in, which he has plenty of time to do before he even snaps the ball, and then he knows where his best reads are based on where the two interior defensive linemen are lined up at. Whichever gaps are not filled by the two interior defensive linemen will be taken advantage of by a smart and athletic quarterback in the midline option. But luckily for the Redskins and any other teams that run 4-3 defenses, NFL teams don't really run the option much, even more so the midline option. NFL teams are more dependent upon their starting quarterback's health with all of the money or recent high draft picks they've invested in them, so they don't even want their quarterback being a running option. So you don't really have to worry about this weakness in both the 4-3 under and the 4-3 over getting exposed often. It's too risky for NFL offenses. They basically leave that stuff to the college teams who aren't nearly as invested in their starting quarterback's health as NFL teams are. Plus, a lot of college quarterbacks are better at running the option than they are at being pocket passers. So it's like, why not run the option? But basically, the biggest weakness to both the 4-3 under and the 4-3 over are not likely to be thrown at the 4-3 defense uses at the NFL level. So don't stress out over it. And another weakness for these forms of the 4-3 defense we've talked about so far is that when the front four has one gap responsibilities, the linebackers are forced to take a step forward when the ball is snapped. So the linebackers and the overall defense are susceptible to play action. While they are moving forward when the ball is being snapped, receivers can sneak behind them and the QB can hit them for easy gains. And also, similar to the option plays, any misdirections like sweeps, reverses, and counters, and all of that stuff are big weaknesses to the 4-3 base, 4-3 under, and 4-3 over. And back to the 4-3 under defense overall summary. And now back to the 4-3 defense overall summary. Along with the great Legion of Boom defense who utilized their version of the 4-3 under, the 4-3 under was also used to produce some of the deadliest interior pass rushes in NFL history, like John Randall in Minnesota or Warren Sapp in Tampa Bay. And speaking of Tampa Bay, let's just go ahead and talk about the Tampa 2 before we move on to the final form of the 4-3 defense I'm going to talk about, the Y9. Now the Tampa 2 defense ran out of the 4-3 and can be ran with the under or over or base. Any type of 4-3 defense. It's almost always ran out of the 4-3, but it can be ran in other base defenses. But, like I said, it's usually ran out of the 4-3, one of those types. But since I just talked about the 4-3 under, and since this is the way that Tampa Bay ran it when they were great, the team who invented it, I'm going to talk about how it is ran in the 4-3 under. The Tampa 2 is a type of coverage that you may hear a lot, but may not know exactly what it is. I use it quite a bit in Madden when I'm running Superstar KO with two of my dogs, but it's fairly simple. Let's get into it. The front four does what it does, but then the linebackers is where this gets interesting. The Sam linebacker, even though he is lined up right at the line of scrimmage, along with the defensive lineman, he drops back into coverage, covering anybody that runs into his zone near the line of scrimmage on the strong side of the defense. The will linebacker, starting from where a will linebacker normally starts in any 4-3 defense, covers the area opposite of the Sam linebacker, which is anything near the line of scrimmage on the weak side of the offense. And the part of this coverage that makes it so unique and easily identifiable is how the Mike linebacker is tasked with covering the deep middle third. When the ball is snapped, the Mike linebacker is supposed to take 2 steps towards the line of scrimmage just in case it is a run play. And while doing that, he's supposed to diagnose whether or not it is a run play or a pass play. And once he decides it's a pass, he's supposed to be in a full back pedal for about 7 yards, and he is not to allow anybody to get past him in the middle of the field. So running this defense requires a Mike linebacker who can cover very well and, most importantly, can diagnose plays very quickly. The Redskins currently only have a couple of those, but I'm going to talk about who they are in depth later in the video in the part where I talk about how each current Redskins player fits into the 4-3 defense and all of its variances. Then you have the two safeties who are each covering their own deep thirds. The free safety will usually cover the weak side deep third, and the strong safety will usually cover the strong side deep third. So this means you would need two safeties that can cover well. Not only just the one free safety, but the strong safety also has to have strong zone coverage ability. And the two corners are in charge of covering their respective flats. The outside cornerback on the weak side is in charge of the weak side flat, and the outside cornerback on the strong side is in charge of the strong side flat. And there you go. Basically, you run the Tampa 2 once you are almost 100% sure a team is throwing the ball. Basically like third and long situations. Drop 7 people back into coverage, have the two safeties and the Mike linebacker split up the deep third coverage responsibilities, and their main goals are to keep everything in front of them and not let anything get past them. Everybody else in coverage has very specific areas they try to control, and then it's up to the front four to be able to generate pressure all by themselves. As long as you have a dominant front four that can generate pressure on their own, the only real weakness of this coverage is where the middle linebacker used to be before the ball is snapped. But that's within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. So if there's a 3rd and 15, for example, if the defense allows somebody to catch the ball where the middle linebacker was before the ball was snapped, it shouldn't result in the first down. Only like a handful of yards, like maybe 7. Also, the will linebacker and the Sam linebacker will sort of follow the receiver that enters that zone in a limited fashion while they're staying disciplined to their true responsibilities, because in order for a receiver to get to that weakness in the middle of the defense, he has to enter in the area either from the Sam's responsibility or the Will's. So somebody will be attached to that receiver for a certain distance anyway, and if athletic and smart enough, the Sam or the will not allow a reception to be made in that weakness anyway. Also, with everybody having fairly easy zone responsibilities, the defenders, especially the corners, can sit still and watch the quarterback's eyes and be very aggressive and make plays on throws towards their zone. The corners literally just sit in their zones in the flat and have the freedom to use the sideline to jump on routes. It's definitely one of the more aggressive zone coverage packages. Also, the Tampa 2 as a base can be very flexible. It used to only be a coverage, but now it's possible to run the Tampa 2 almost as a base in a way. A great defensive coordinator can get very creative with it. There can be many coverage switches, blitzes, stunts, and all kinds of stuff. Rondé Barber, even as great of a future Hall of Famer he is, owes a lot of his success to a defense that allowed him to be aggressive and get the many interceptions he used to get, and that also allowed him to blitz a lot and get as many sacks as he used to get. Rondé Barber is one of 2 people in all of NFL history to have 20 sacks and 30 interceptions, and a creative Tampa 2 user set him up to do that by utilizing his skills and allowing him to do what he did best, and that's be aggressive in coverage and blitz to get the quarterback. Now let's move on to the last type of 4-3 defense I'm going to talk about, and that's the wide 9. Now there's different ways to run this front with where the edge rushers and linebackers are placed, but in the vast majority of cases, the nose tackle is lined up in a 2-eye tech, and the defensive tackle is lined up in a 3-tech. Unlike the 4-3 under and 4-3 over, there is no specific side either should be on. In some wide 9s, the nose tackle is on the weak side, and in other wide 9 formations, the nose tackle is on the strong side. But since I hope the Redskins do the same thing as the 49ers, go from the number 2 pick, draft an all-pro caliber pass rusher, and then go to the Super Bowl immediately afterwards the following season, I'm going to break down the wide 9 that the 49ers used in 2019. First, I want to explain how they run a wide 9 against 12 personnel, which is when the offense has 2 tight ends, 1 on each side, in line as extra blockers. There's almost no real strong or weak side now. But for the purposes of breaking down these different wide 9s, I'm going to keep the common theme of the offense's right side being the strong side and the left side being the weak side, even though there's a tight end on both sides, so there really is no strong or weak side. Now in the 49ers wide 9, when they're up against 12 personnel, the nose tackle is lined up in a 2-eye tech, like I said earlier, on the weak side of the offense. The defensive tackle is lined up in a 3-tech, attacking the outside shoulder of the right guard on the strong side of the offense. And then here's where it gets interesting. The bigger, stronger, more powerful edge rusher is lined up in a sort of 6-tech, right in front of the tight end on the weak side, the left side of the offense. on the right side of the screen. And then the faster, more explosive, quicker pass rushing type of edge rusher is in a wide 9. They are extra far down the strong side of the offense. This allows him to best utilize his great athleticism and pass rushing skills. He has a straight angle with a running head start towards the quarterback or ball carrier. And then the Mike linebacker is lined up as a 0 right over the center, but a little towards the strong side to make up for the wide 9 edge rusher being lined up so far wide. And then the Sam linebacker is almost in a tan, lined up over the right tackle, but he's a little further towards the strong side. And then the Will linebacker is almost a tan because he's lined up over the left tackle, but he's lined up a little inward to go along with the overall shift that all of the linebackers make towards the wide 9 edge rusher. And then the strong safety steps up further to handle the responsibility of the outside shoulder of the weak side tight end, which takes me to the gap responsibilities. Working from the left to the right on the screen, which is technically right to left or strong side to weak side from the offense's point of view. But for us, we're going from the left side of the screen to the right. The wide 9 edge rusher is responsible for the strong side D gap. The Sam linebacker is responsible for the strong side C gap. The 3 tech defensive tackle is responsible for the strong side B gap. The Mike linebacker is responsible for the strong side A gap. And then you have the 2 tech nose tackle, who is responsible for the weak side A gap. The Will linebacker is responsible for the weak side B gap. The 6 tech edge rusher is responsible for the weak side C gap. And the strong safety moves up to be responsible for the weak side D gap. That way, every gap is covered. But once the play actually starts and the ball is snapped, it starts to look like this. Both of the interior defensive linemen usually get double teamed, and it becomes their job to hold their own and get as much push as they can, clog their gap, and not get bullied and pushed back. The 3 tech getting doubled by the right guard and the right tackle, and the 2 tech nose tackle getting doubled by the center and the left guard. The wide 9 edge rusher should be doing a better job than this guy at attacking the strong side tight end and running right past them easily or simply overpowering them out of the way. Then the 6 tech edge rusher should have a one-on-one battle with the weak side tight end, and then the Sam linebacker and Mike linebacker should be left clean to attack their respective gaps if the ball carrier chooses to run into one of those gaps. The Will linebacker may have to attack and beat the block against the left tackle, which is a very difficult task for most Will linebackers who are usually best at covering slot receivers and are not usually built to fight blocks against the biggest guys on the field. So you have to have a strong Will linebacker to get this done. And the strong safety should set the edge and not allow anything to get past them to the outside on the right side of the screen, but the wide receiver on the weak side crashed in to block him. So the cornerback on that side, the weak side, and the right side of the screen was able to quickly recognize it's a run play, and now it's his job to set the edge and not allow anybody to get past him. Also, the 6 tech edge rusher won his one-on-one against the weak side tight end, which he should do every time, but you never know. But yeah, since he won his one-on-one like he was supposed to, he was able to make the play and get to the running back in the backfield. But as you can see, every gap is covered. So against a run-heavy team and formation like this 12 personnel the Detroit Lions are running, this version of the wide 9 is literally built to stop this. There is nowhere for the ball carrier to go if everybody does their job and holds their responsibilities. And the interior defensive linemen should be able to hold their own against their respective double teams in order to keep the Sam and Mike linebackers clean. So you have to have 2 strong defensive tackles. The wide 9 edge rusher should be able to beat a tight end off the edge, unlike in this picture. And the same goes with the 6 tech edge rusher on the weak side on the right side of the screen. He should be able to win his one-on-one against that tight end, but unlike the wide 9 edge rusher, he actually did win his one-on-one. And then if the wide receiver on the weak side doesn't crash down to block the strong safety is the one who's supposed to set the edge on the right side of the screen. But since the wide receiver crashed down on him, it's up to the cornerback to set the edge. But now let's talk about how the wide 9 4-3 defense looks when the opposing offense is in a normal formation, like with only one tight end who is on the strong side like most teams do, most of the time. Now here, in this more normal and more often used version of the wide 9 front, the 2 interior defensive linemen are in their same spots with the same responsibilities. the 3-tech defensive tackle is on the strong side, and the 2-I-tech nose tackle is on the weak side. Same as the wide 9 front as the 49ers ran against 12 personnel. But now, both of the edge rushing defensive ends are in wide 9s, also known as the ghost, wide 9 ghost, whichever one you want to call it. The will linebacker is in a truer tan spot than he was in that wide 9 that the 49ers were running against 12 personnel. He is lined up directly over the left tackle now. The Mike linebacker is lined up directly over the strong side A gap, not necessarily a 0 spot. From left to right on the screen and the offense, the weak side wide 9 edge rusher is responsible for the C gap again, but now he is also responsible for setting the edge and run support. The will linebacker is responsible for the weak side B gap again. The 2-I-tech nose tackle is responsible for the weak side A gap again. The Mike linebacker is responsible for the strong side A gap again. The 3-tech defensive tackle is responsible for the strong side B gap again. And the Sam linebacker is responsible for the strong side C gap again. And then the edge rusher who is on the strong side, where the tight end is lined up even further away from the center and is responsible for the D gap again. And is also in charge of setting the edge and run support again on the strong side, on the right side of the screen. And now the strong safety isn't needed at the line of scrimmage like he was against 12 personnel. And again, the 2 interior defensive linemen are each tasked with eating up double teams. Now the advantages and disadvantages to the wide 9 fronts. The wide 9 fronts are built to get optimal pass rush with only 4 defensive linemen, especially the one the Dolphins were running against the Bengals. That version is built to defeat elite passing offenses. The edge rushers are positioned so far wide that they have an advantage against a blocker in their way. Speedy edge rushers will be at their deadliest, most disruptive in the wide 9. The tackle or tight end responsible for blocking a wide 9 on passing plays is at a big disadvantage. He has to kick slide very quickly and cover lots of ground just to even get hands on the edge rusher. And while the blocker is so worried about getting out far enough to even just get hands on the edge rusher, they are at the mercy of what the edge rusher wants to do. If the edge rusher is explosive, fast, and quick enough, he can just simply run past the blocker, trying his best to get out far enough to get in the edge rusher's way. Can literally just run around the blocker with some athleticism and speed and maybe a little hand technique. But at the same time, with the tight end or tackle trying so hard to cover a lot of ground to get in the optimal position to block the edge rusher can just use the blocker's momentum of going outside against them and just use athleticism, hand technique, and foot technique to cut inside to get to the quarterback even quicker. Or just simply bull rush them while they're in their awkward stance of trying to hurry up and move outside. It just simply puts the blocking tight end or tackle in a terrible situation. So because of this type of wide 9 is usually only used on passing downs. Also, the wide 9 is great for cover 2. And I just want to show people who don't know what cover 2 is how the cover 2 looks. So ignore where the defensive linemen and linebackers are lined up. This isn't a wide 9 front at all. I just want to show y'all what a cover 2 coverage is. It's when the 2 safeties split the deep coverage into 2 halves. So this requires both safeties to be great in coverage, the strong safety and the free safety. They have to be able to read quarterbacks' eyes from far away, be able to sense and shadow receivers running into their respective zones, and have the athleticism and speed necessary to make plays in their coverage responsibilities. And then the linebackers don't necessarily have to be in zone coverage, but if they are, the will linebacker is usually responsible for the weak side hook curl 1/5 of the bottom zone coverage. The Mike linebacker is usually responsible for the middle 1/5 of the bottom coverage, and the Sam linebacker is responsible for the strong side hook curl zone 1/5 of the bottom zone coverage. And just like the linebackers, the cornerbacks can play either man coverage or zone coverage in the cover 2. The cover 2 is literally any coverage package where the 2 defensive backs split the deep coverage in half. So what the linebackers and cornerbacks do don't affect whether it's a cover 2 or not. But the corner on the weak side will usually be responsible for the weak side flat 1/5 of the bottom coverage, and the corner on the strong side will usually be responsible for the strong side flat 1/5 of the bottom coverage. But I just wanted to explain the cover 2 just so y'all can know what it is while I'm saying that it's a great coverage to run out of the wide 9. And now back to the other advantages of the wide 9. Now the final main advantage of running the wide 9 front is his ability to set the edge very well on both sides of the offense to stop any outside runs. Unlike the 4-3 base, 4-3 under, and 4-3 over, the 4-3 wide 9 is great against outside runs like sweeps and outside zone runs. mostly because the wide 9 defensive end edge rusher on the strong side is not attached to the tight end blocking them, and the wide 9 edge rusher on the weak side is not attached to the offensive tackle assigned to blocking him. All they have to do is fire straight up when the ball is snapped, and they have already set the edge. The edge rushers have already successfully reached the outside shoulder of the blocker tasked with stopping them before the ball is even hiked, really. This forces the ball carrier to cut the run back inside, which is ideal because you always want to keep everything inside towards the heart of the defense when it comes to stopping a ball carrier running with the ball. This is how you're able to get more help and more men on the defense who can contribute to making the tackle on the play. This is where the cavalry is. The linebackers and maybe even some of the DBs will be able to help when the ball carrier is forced inside. Now to the weaknesses of the wide 9 front. The wide 9 4-3 defense is especially weak against inside runs. With the defensive line spread so far out and apart from each other, it creates a lot of soft spots in the inside of the front 7. Offenses will try to expose these soft spots by attacking the linebackers responsible for these gaps. Since the defensive linemen are responsible for the weak side C gap, the weak side A gap, the strong side B gap, and the strong side D gap, offenses will love to take their chances against the linebackers who are obviously smaller and weaker than the big old defensive linemen. So in the run game, offenses will attack the weak side B gap, the strong side A gap, and the strong side C gap. And to make matters even worse for the defense, they will run inside zone plays into these 3 gaps that the linebackers are responsible for, and even use pin and pull concepts like traps and whams. And since I'm tryharding this whole video, I might as well just go ahead and show y'all and explain to y'all what traps and whams are. Doesn't have much to deal with a 4-3 video, but since I'm talking about it, y'all might as well know what it is. A trap is when a guard, for example on this play, the left guard, just goes and runs to the opposite side defensive tackle and just blasts him as hard as he can, very unexpectedly. They are trying to open up a huge hole in that strong side A gap. So the left tackle goes and blocks the will linebacker at the next level in the defense, completely ignoring the weak side edge rusher because he won't really even have a chance to affect this play unless he is really smart and really athletic. Then the center goes and blocks the 2-eye tech nose tackle to the left of him. The right guard goes and creates a mismatch and uses his much larger size to block the Mike linebacker at the next level of the defense. And then the right tackle also creates a mismatch of size and power and goes and blocks the Sam linebacker at the next level. And then the tight end blocks the strong side edge rusher and tries to hold his own as long as possible, which leaves the 3-tech defensive tackle unblocked. But no, he's not. You have the left guard in this case running a full sprint to the 3-tech defensive tackle with a hard-hitting block from the side, where the defensive tackle usually doesn't expect it at all. As a defensive tackle, you're used to getting blocked by people in your vision right in front of you, but in a trap, the blocker is coming to get you, and it's not only coming from outside of your vision and outside where you normally get blocked from, but they also get a sort of running head start to get a big hit on you. It's pretty effective. And now the wham. For this example, the run play is aimed for the strong side A gap again, just like the trap play I just discussed. The left guard goes and creates a mismatch of power and size by going to the next level of the defense and blocking the will linebacker. That's possibly the strongest offensive lineman against supposedly the weakest linebacker on the defense. That's a huge mismatch. Then you have the center also creating a mismatch of power by going to the next level and blocking the Mike linebacker. And then the right guard blocks the 3-tech defensive tackle. The right tackle creates a mismatch of power and size by going to the next level and blocking the Sam linebacker. And then the tight end tries to hold his own against the wide 9 strong side defensive end, even though he's far enough from the play to where the edge rusher can't really even affect the play, even if he does beat the tight end. Same with that wide 9 edge rusher on the weak side, with the left tackle blocking him. But then that leaves the 2-eye tech nose tackle unblocked, right? Nope. People who run the wham use an extra tight end. You know that circle that you see all the way to the right, that's back a little bit. He comes and blindside blocks the nose tackle. It's up to the Mike linebacker to sniff out this play and warn the nose tackle of this blindside block that may be coming. A signal that the offense may be running a wham is that the extra tight end all the way on the right will motion a little closer to the nose tackle that he will have to block right before the ball is snapped. When the Mike linebacker sees this tight end motion over a little bit, he's supposed to alert the nose tackle immediately. And if he doesn't, that nose tackle will get blown up by the tight end unexpectedly from his blind side, out of his vision, and this play will get a large chunk of yards every time. And even if he does warn the nose tackle, if the nose tackle doesn't win against that tight end before the ball carrier reaches that hole the offensive line is trying to open up, it's over anyway, even if the nose tackle is aware of the wham coming. After the nose tackle, the next most important player in the front seven who needs to win their matchup is the 3-tech defensive tackle against the right guard. If both of them lose, you can just chalk up this play for at least like 10 yards in the run game, easily. But as you can see by all of these different types of creative run play styles, the 4-3 defense period, especially the wide 9 fronts, are very susceptible to inside runs, and their linebackers will have to be very powerful to be able to consistently get off blocks from people larger and normally stronger than them and fight through all kinds of chaos and traffic within the box. If the linebackers in a 4-3 wide 9 are not very strong, they will consistently get tossed away in inside run plays, which will allow offenses to easily run the ball right into the teeth of the defense over and over again. And the last major weakness of the wide 9 defense is offenses using play action, just like it is for all other forms of the 4-3 defense. In the wide 9 specifically, the Sam linebacker has to explode downhill towards the line of scrimmage when there's even a hint of run action towards the C gap. It's literally his job to rush down and stop any runs coming towards his C gap responsibility. So play action draws him forward and makes it easy for a receiver, tight end, or running back to run behind them in the big open area between the Sam and the closest safety. So when running the wide 9, make sure your Sam linebacker is very smart, instinctive, and quick enough to recognize the play as play action and have the speed to get back and stop any passes coming into his direction over his head, because offenses will usually target his area. All of the linebackers in the wide 9 have to both be strong and powerful enough to shed blocks and make tackles in the run game, and at the same time have to be both smart and athletic enough to react to pass plays. But there you go. Those were the main ways to run the 4-3 formation fronts.